Hello and welcome to the third rail. If you follow the channel, you might have seen a couple of videos about a temporary Märklin layout I am currently working on. If you haven't, I strongly recommend you watch the other videos in the series accessible via the little card at the top of the screen now. Over the last few months, I've had the opportunity to fine-tune the operation of the layout. I've had a few running sessions with varied types of rolling stock, and as everything is behaving as expected and desired, it's now time to get the catenary out. Of course, I'll be using the Märklin M-track catenary system that was introduced at the same time as the track system in 1957. It was marketed as a way to add more realism to the layout. First of all, from a cosmetic perspective, electric locomotives could run with their pantographs up. And from a technical perspective, this is a working catenary system which can provide power to electric locomotives. This extends the capabilities from an operational perspective on the layout with enhanced multi-train operation. You can have a steam locomotive or diesel locomotive taking its power from the track and controlled via one transformer, and on a separate circuit have electric locomotives controlled by a different transformer. This allows to set, for example, different speeds for two consists traveling on a same line. This catenary system was produced for a period of over 40 years. During that time, it received changes as new elements introduced in the track system required it. The system is made of a series of elements. We have various types of masts, which are meant to support overhead lines, which come in different shapes. We also have cross sections, which are meant to be used mainly in stations or in areas where we have up to 4 parallel tracks. And we have also a series of masts which are made to support the cross-section elements. So let's have a look at the working principle of all that. A standard Märklin locomotive receives its power through the center studs on the track. The current is used by the motor and the return occurs via the wheel to the two outer rail. With the catenary system, this changes. It's the equivalent of lifting the center rail and providing an equivalent function through the overhead line. So the current travels now from the overhead line through the pantograph into the motor, and the return occurs as before via the wheels through the two outer rails. There are little levers on all analog locomotives pre-2010 that can be used to switch the operation from the center pickup shoe to the overhead line. As a result, the system is extremely easy to retrofit. There is no need to change any accessory or its connectivity. The only thing that needs to be taken care of is the replication of the isolated sections used for braking or stopping areas on the layout. The elements of the catenary system can be combined to form what I would call some basic building blocks. These building blocks can in turn be replicated in the required areas around the layout. This makes the installation and planning much easier. For this build, I'll be needing a few of these basic building blocks. The first one is the simplest one. It's a straight or curved section, basically 2 masts and a piece of overhead wire. The base of the mast is engineered to fit around the profile of the track bed. To set it up, it's simply a matter of sliding the mast base under the track bed and then press fitting the track into the base. The result is a very strong bond or fit. You can even shake the track and the mast will remain firmly attached to the track bed. So of course I need another mast to be able to attach the overhead line. We'll clip that into place, and there we go. We are ready for the line. I just need to find one with the right length. There we go. The overhead line is made of a type of wire which is very flexible yet sturdy. It can be bent into shape as required. There are some little rings on each end of the various species of overhead lines, which are meant to fit at the top of the mast, of course. The top ring fits into the hook at the top of the mast. I'll attach the other one just for stability, although it's likely to fall off. There we go. Then the bottom ring of the overhead line needs to be pushed onto the little lever spring on the mast, like so. Then we just need to repeat the operation on the other side. So top ring on the hook and bottom ring onto the little lever spring again. These overhead wires come in different lengths to adapt to various scenarios. We first have the longest piece, which is the 7019, which is meant to be used on straight sections of track only. Then we have two slightly shorter sections, the 7018 and 7278, which are meant to be used on curves and shorter straight sections. To cover different lengths, we also have some compensation sections which are engineered to interlock into each other using a male and female connector system. So we have the two basic elements, which are the 7014 and 7015, which are male and female connectors on one side and mast connectors on the other side. So they simply interlock into each other, as you can see on the screen, and I can simply slide them back and forth to adapt to the required length. So I'm just going to set up a shorter run on the little track section at random. Then I'm simply going to grab my compensation sections and attach them to the mast, as I did with the longer section earlier in the video. Same system, equally as simple or fiddly. I've got a camera between myself and what I'm filming, so it's a bit difficult to do this at arm length. But as you can see, it's standing in as stable as the longer sections. If we need something a bit longer, we can use a little intermediate section which simply slide into the relevant connector on each end of the other two sections. Then I can simply adapt them to the required length and reattach the end of the section to the mast. And there we go. So far, so good. Let's have a look at the next building block we'll need, which is to be used with the turnouts. Now, with the turnouts, we've got an added complication, which is we have a curved section branching off a straight section, and that needs to be replicated with the catenary system. For this purpose, there is a piece of wire, reference 7013, which is engineered slightly differently. It's got a mast attachment in the middle and a male connector on one side and a female connector on the other side. This piece of wire is meant to take care of the curved section of the turnout. So before installing the section, I need to put together a combination of wires. I need, of course, the piece of wire for the curve and two additional bits, which are the same compensation bits we saw earlier in the straight building block section. These simply slide into place, and that will form a longer piece of wire which will then be ready to install above the curved section of the turnout. So I now need to set up a few masts in order to be able to install this piece of wire. I'll zoom out so that we get a better view. There we go. So I'll start by placing a mast just before the entrance of the turnout. I'll just clip it into place, click, there we go. Now this is where the center of the piece of wire we've just made will be residing. I can then take care of the exit of the curved section, where I need to place another mast. And for stability, I'm going to attach an additional mast slightly ahead of the turnout. So, ready to fit the wire. I'll start by attaching the middle attachment. There we go. Then for stability, I'm going to attach the end located before the turnout area to the mast there. Let me just adjust things slightly. There we go. Hook, lever. We're all done. And we can now look at the curved part of the turnout. So I'll start by attaching the wire to the mast. So I might need to readjust the mast for distance a bit. There we go. Then it's another hook lever job. And if we look at the configuration now from above, we can see that the wire is slightly curved, but it's not quite right as far as the position over the track is concerned. It should be towards the center so that it's aligned with the center contact. So that's where the flexibility of the wire system comes into play. And we can bend the wire by simply pushing parts of it between the fingers until it has adopted the required shape. Time to take care of the straight section of the turnout. So I will need an additional mast for this, which I need to position opposite the one that I have placed at the exit of the curve. So I'm going to place my mast, we'll clip it into place like the other ones. There we go. So I now need to set up a piece of wire. I'll reuse the compensation bits to cover the distance between the entrance of the turnout and the exit of the straight section of the turnout. So I simply attach one side to the mast I used for the center of the curve and the other side at the end of the straight section of the turnout. Now we need to run a few visual checks. First we need to check the alignment of the catenary with the center contacts on the track. They need to be as close as possible. That seems to be okay in this case. And the second thing is to check the height of the two little sections over the curved and straight area of the turnout. If they are not at the same height, pantographs are more than likely to get caught in between, and that's something we'd like to avoid. We can now look at how to bring power to our overhead wires, and this is done via a slightly modified type of mast called a feeder mast or a supply mast. There's various references. We'll look at the most simple one, which is the feeder mast. It's got a little piece of red wire which is attached to a metal strip at the back of the mast and conducts the power to the hook section of the mast attachment for the wires. It clips into place like any other mast we've seen so far, and catenary wire, of course, is attached also the same way. We'll need to use these feeder masts in our next building block, which is the isolated section, which you need, for example, for a stopping section ahead of a signal. So isolating the section is done using some special pieces of wire. It's reference 7022. They're easily recognizable because they've got a cut and they're held together with a little piece of bakelite or plastic depending on its age. So one side attaches to the mast and the other side is meant to attach to a compensation bit similar to the one we saw earlier in the video. They simply slide into a female compensation bit, and we can adjust them for size and attach them at one end of the isolated section. And it's a bit fiddly because I've got the camera between my head and my hands, so a bit complicated, but we're there. We then need a similar combination for the other side of the isolated section. So it's just a matter again of sliding the two required pieces together, adjust them for size and attach them to the mast. And once we are done, we'll have set up an isolated section which is receiving its power independently via the feeder mast in the center of the section. There we go, we are done. These isolated sections are connected to signals via the little connectors at the front of the signal base. The power mast needs to be connected to one of the outlets there. It doesn't matter which one. And the other outlet should be connected to the power source for the overhead line. It could be another feeder mast or a connection from the transformer powering the catenary system. So when the signal is open or green, it will let the power through to the isolated section, and when it's shut it will simply cut the power there. All pretty simple. This completes the overview of the building blocks needed for the layout. You will have noticed that I didn't use a single tool while putting together the various bits and pieces. Of course, it's meant to work like this, but it's never really like this, and it's a good idea to keep a little screwdriver and a pair of needle nose pliers handy to bend one or the other bit back into shape and complete the installation. So I can now move to the layout and proceed with the installation. I will not set up any power feeds for now because I don't think I need them based on my experience with the operation of the layout so far. However, it's possible I change my mind at some point, so I will set up all the isolated sections required, should I decide to add an additional level of control. So I usually identify a work area, usually located between two turnouts. I set up the building blocks required for the turnouts, and then I fill the gap between the two turnouts with the other building blocks required. I'm trying to use as many of the longest overhead wire pieces in the process, but that's easier said than done. So we've got the station area on screen now, and if we zoom a bit closer, I will start with the turnout on the right hand side. Then I'll move to the other end of the station and set up the turnout on the right hand side there. And then I'll proceed to install whatever is needed in between on the long straight section. This means setting up one turnout building block on one end, then another one on the other end, then the isolated sections needed for the stopping area and the braking area ahead of it, and then fill the gaps remaining with as many 7019s as possible. Then I can replicate the same setup on the other side of the station, and once that's complete, I can identify a turnout further ahead, set up the required building blocks in the vicinity of the turnout, for example, isolated sections if a signal is involved, and then fill the gap in between the station and the area I just set up with whatever is required. Then it's a matter of slowly but surely moving along the layout, installing the various building blocks as and when required. This goes a bit quicker now on screen, but all in all, the installation on the layout has required 8 to 10 hours. It's simply not a task that can be done quickly, unfortunately, but I think the time spent doing it is worthwhile. Unfortunately, this is only half the job. We still have a lot of testing to do, and I've already identified the guinea pig for this, which will be the recent addition to the collections, the 3050, because it's got worn pantographs. I will cover the testing in the next video. If you have made it that far, thank you very much for watching. It's very much appreciated. I'm seeing the number of subscribers go up slowly but surely. I find it amazing that people are interested in my content and even subscribe to the channel or hit the notification bell to be notified of new uploads, or give me a like from time to time. It's all very rewarding and keeps me going. I'd like to thank you very much again for this. But for now, bye and see you soon on the channel.